Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. Tonight, we begin gently, without urgency, by stepping towards something familiar and ancient. Forests exist almost everywhere on Earth, spreading across mountains, valleys, plains, and distant northern lands. They are not rare places. They are common, patient presences that have quietly shaped the planet long before modern life learned to move quickly. When you think of a forest, there is often an immediate image that forms. Tall trunks rising upward, light breaking into soft fragments, the sense of space narrowing and widening at the same time. Even imagining this change in environment can begin to shift how the body settles. Forests cover nearly a third of the land surface of Earth. They appear in warm equatorial regions where rainfall is frequent, in temperate zones where seasons change visibly, and in northern landscapes where winters linger and growth is slow. Despite these differences, forests share a common rhythm. They grow upward and outward, but they also grow inward, into soil, into time, into systems that operate without instruction. From above, forests appear dense and continuous. From within, they feel layered and spacious, offering room for movement and pause. As you enter a forest, the world often feels quieter, even if sound still exists. Wind moves differently here, slowed by branches and leaves. Light loses its sharpness, filtered through layers of green. The air tends to feel cooler, shaded from direct sun. These changes are not imagined. Trees physically alter their surroundings. Their canopies slow rainfall. Their leaves release moisture into the air. Their trunks block wind and absorb sound. Without effort, the forest reshapes the space around you. Forests also operate on long timescales. Some trees grow only a few millimeters wider each year. Others live for centuries, recording seasons in their rings without memory or intention. Growth happens slowly enough that it often escapes notice. Change is constant, but it is gentle. Even when forests appear still, processes continue quietly. Water moves downward through soil. Roots extend gradually. Microorganisms work unseen. Nothing rushes and nothing pauses. This slow continuity is part of what makes forests feel calming to the mind. There is no demand placed on attention. Paths curve naturally. Sight lines are interrupted by trunks and leaves. The environment encourages softer focus rather than sharp vigilance. The forest does not ask to be interpreted. It does not require understanding. It simply exists, steady and ongoing. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. It helps others find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy traveler at a time. The quiet continues here, just as it is. Forests are also deeply connected to the planet itself. Trees absorb carbon dioxide from the air and store it in wood, roots, and soil. In doing so, forests help regulate climate and stabilize temperature. Oxygen released through photosynthesis becomes part of the breathable atmosphere. These exchanges happen continuously, without awareness, without interruption. A forest does not need recognition to perform its role. Its work is woven into the background of life. As we move forward together tonight, we will explore forests not as destinations, but as systems. as layered spaces where light, water, air, and time move gently through living structures. We will notice how forests shape climate, support biodiversity, and influence perception, all while remaining unassuming. There is no need to remember every detail. There is no need to hold on to facts. The aim is not to learn quickly, but to settle slowly. For now, allow the image of the forest to remain simple. Tall forms rising upward, a softened ground beneath, light arriving in pieces rather than beams, everything moving at its own pace, nothing requiring response. This is not an escape. It is a return to a rhythm that has always existed, steady and available. I'm glad you're here. Forests do more than surround life. They participate in it continuously, in ways that are large enough to shape the planet and quiet enough to go unnoticed. As the forest settles into view, it becomes easier to sense this wider role, not as a responsibility or a task, but as a steady exchange happening in the background of everything else. Trees draw carbon dioxide from the air as part of photosynthesis. This process is slow and constant. Carbon becomes part of wood, leaves, roots, and soil. In many forests, more carbon is stored underground than above it, held quietly in dark soil and decaying organic matter. Nothing about this storage feels active or deliberate. It happens gradually, season after season, without urgency. Forests act as long-term reservoirs, holding carbon in place for decades or centuries, smoothing out changes that might otherwise happen too quickly. Oxygen is released as a natural byproduct of this same process. It enters the surrounding air gently, mixing without boundaries. There is no moment when oxygen arrives or leaves. It simply circulates, carried by subtle air movement, shared across landscapes. Forests do not produce oxygen for any single place. Their contribution spreads outward, becoming part of a larger atmospheric balance that supports life far beyond the tree line. Climate regulation follows this same pattern of quiet influence. Forests moderate temperature by providing shade and by releasing moisture into the air. As water moves from leaves into the atmosphere through transpiration, it carries heat away, cooling the surrounding space. This cooling effect does not feel dramatic. It feels like relief, like stepping into shade after standing in open sun. On a larger scale, this same process helps regulate regional and even global temperature patterns. Rainfall is also shaped by forests. Moisture released into the air contributes to cloud formation, especially in large, continuous forest systems. In some regions, forests help generate a portion of their own rainfall, sustaining cycles that repeat without direction. Clouds form, rain falls, soil absorbs water, roots draw it upward again. The cycle continues, not as a loop that needs attention, but as a rhythm that maintains itself. The ground beneath a forest holds much of this balance together. Soil rich with organic matter stores water and nutrients, releasing them slowly. Leaf litter breaks down over time, feeding microorganisms that return essential elements to the earth. This slow recycling prevents sudden loss or buildup. Nothing accumulates too much. Nothing disappears too quickly. Forests recycle nearly everything they produce, not because they aim to, but because the system has evolved that way. From a distance, forests appear dense and unified. From within, they feel layered and breathable. Air moves more slowly here. Wind softens as it passes through branches. Temperature shifts feel gradual. These physical changes influence how the body responds, often before the mind notices. Breathing tends to deepen slightly. Muscles release without instruction. Attention widens rather than narrowing. Forests support the planet without drawing focus to themselves. Rivers begin in forested regions where soil filters water before it moves downstream. Cities rely on forested watersheds for clean drinking water, often without seeing the source. Carbon stored in trees slows atmospheric change without announcement. Oxygen released becomes part of every breath without recognition. These contributions are continuous and backgrounded, never asking to be observed. There is something settling about systems that function without supervision. Forests do not check for results. They do not optimize. They continue. Growth, decay, absorption, release. Each process unfolds at a pace that resists urgency. This steadiness offers a contrast to environments shaped by constant adjustment and response. As this understanding settles in, there is no need to hold on to specifics. The exact numbers and measurements can fade. What remains is the sense of forests as quiet stabilizers. Not frozen, not static, simply balanced. Participating in the planet's systems without drawing attention to themselves. The forest does not perform its role for an audience. It does not require awareness to continue. Its exchanges with air, water, and soil proceed whether anyone is present or not. That continuity can be felt as a kind of permission, a reminder that many essential processes do not depend on effort or focus. Here, the forest holds its place within something larger, calm, regulated, and ongoing. And as the space continues to settle, that same steadiness can be allowed to settle inward as well. Water moves through forests slowly, guided by structure rather than force. As attention settles into this process, it becomes easier to sense how forests interact with rain, not as an event, but as a long, gentle passage. Rain does not arrive in a forest and immediately strike the ground. It is met first by leaves, branches, and bark. The canopy softens its descent, breaking large drops into smaller ones, delaying their arrival below. This delay matters. When rain is slowed, it has time to spread. It trickles along leaves. It follows branches. It drips rather than pours. By the time water reaches the forest floor, it arrives gently, without the sharp impact that can disturb exposed soil. This simple slowing reduces erosion and prevents sudden runoff. The forest acts as a buffer, absorbing intensity before it can become disruption. Once water reaches the ground, the work continues. Forest soil is loose and layered, filled with roots, organic matter, and tiny spaces that hold moisture. Instead of flowing away, water sinks downward. The soil behaves like a sponge, drawing water in and storing it temporarily. Some of this water remains near the surface, nourishing plants and microorganisms. Some moves deeper, seeping slowly toward underground reservoirs. This gradual movement supports streams and rivers long after rainfall ends. Many of the world's major rivers begin in forested regions, not because forests create water, but because they manage it well. Water that enters a forest is released over time rather than all at once. Springs continue to flow. Streams remain steady. The forest stretches the presence of rain across days, weeks, and even seasons. Roots play a quiet role in this process. They create pathways through soil, increasing its ability to absorb water. As roots grow and die, they leave behind channels that guide moisture deeper underground. These channels do not disappear quickly. They persist, shaping how water moves long after a tree has stopped growing. In this way, forests build memory into the land, storing the effects of past growth in the structure of the soil itself. Water taken up by roots does not stay there. It moves upward through trunks and branches, eventually reaching leaves. From there, it returns to the air through transpiration. This release is slow and continuous, invisible to the eye but measurable in its effect. Moisture rises into the atmosphere, contributing to humidity and cloud formation. In large forest systems, this process helps sustain rainfall patterns, allowing forests to participate in their own renewal. The cooling effect of this movement is subtle. As water evaporates from leaves, heat is carried away. Air temperature shifts slightly. The change may only be a few degrees, but it is enough to alter how the space feels. Shade combines with moisture to create an environment that resists extremes. Heat does not accumulate as quickly. Cold does not settle as sharply. The forest moderates rather than eliminates, softening edges instead of creating barriers. These water processes unfold continuously, without checkpoints or adjustments. There is no moment when the forest decides how much water to hold or release. The balance emerges from structure and time. Leaf shapes, root depth, soil composition. Each contributes quietly. Together, they form a system that responds to rainfall not with urgency, but with patience. For humans, this steady handling of water often goes unnoticed. Clean drinking water arrives through pipes. Rivers flow without explanation. Floods are prevented or reduced without visible intervention. Forested watersheds support cities far downstream, even when the forest itself is far from view. The support is indirect, backgrounded, and constant. Within the forest, this water movement contributes to a sense of calm. Sound is softened as rain filters through leaves. Air feels heavier but not oppressive. The ground remains cool and damp. Even after rain has passed, moisture lingers, held in soil and wood, extending the feeling of freshness. The environment does not rush to dry. It takes its time. As this rhythm continues, there is no need to track where the water goes next. It moves downward. It moves upward. It moves outward. Always guided by structure rather than demand. The forest does not hurry rain along, and it does not cling to it. It simply participates in the movement, shaping it gently. This ongoing exchange between forest and water is neither dramatic nor fragile. It has persisted across climates and centuries, adapting slowly, adjusting without urgency. And as this understanding settles, the image can remain simple. Rain arriving softly, soil receiving it, roots guiding it, air accepting it back again. A cycle that continues without attention, steady and complete. As water settles into soil and air, another shift becomes noticeable, one that is felt more than measured. Forests change how temperature behaves, not by stopping heat or cold, but by slowing their movement, stretching transitions so they feel less abrupt. This moderation happens quietly through shade, moisture, and structure working together. Tree canopies block direct sunlight before it reaches the ground. Light that passes through leaves arrives broken into fragments, softened and scattered. Without constant direct exposure, the forest floor warms more slowly during the day. Heat does not accumulate all at once. It spreads gently, filtered through layers of foliage. This is why stepping into a forest often feels like relief, even on warm days. The change is subtle but immediate. Shade is only part of the effect. Leaves release moisture into the air through transpiration, and this moisture carries heat away as it evaporates. The result is a cooling process that happens continuously without pause. It does not depend on wind or weather events. It happens leaf by leaf, moment by moment. The forest cools itself from the inside out. Wind behaves differently here as well. Trees interrupt air movement, breaking strong gusts into smaller currents. Instead of sweeping across open land, wind weaves between trunks and branches, losing speed as it moves. Near the ground, this creates calmer conditions. Air feels steadier. Sudden temperature shifts are less common. The space becomes buffered, insulated by living structure. These effects combine to create what scientists call a microclimate. Inside a forest, temperatures are often several degrees cooler during the day than in open areas nearby. At night, forests release heat more slowly. Tree cover traps warmth close to the ground, preventing rapid cooling. This means nighttime temperatures inside forests tend to drop gradually rather than sharply. Extremes are softened on both ends. This moderation supports life in quiet ways. Plants and animals are protected from sudden stress. Soil retains moisture longer. Frost arrives later and leaves sooner. Seeds and roots remain insulated by leaf litter and organic material. The forest does not eliminate change, but it stretches it out, giving living systems time to adjust. For the body, these softened conditions often translate into a sense of ease. Temperature that changes slowly does not demand immediate response. Muscles remain relaxed. Breathing stays steady. There is no need to brace against heat or cold. The environment feels cooperative rather than challenging. Even without stepping into a forest, the idea of this buffering can settle the mind. A place where transitions are gradual, where nothing shifts too quickly, where shade and moisture work together to reduce intensity. The forest does not create comfort by adding anything extra. It creates comfort by removing sharpness. This gentleness is not accidental. It emerges from density, height, and time. Trees grow upward, outward, and downward, filling space in ways that slow energy as it moves. Heat, wind, and light all pass through layers rather than arriving directly. The result is an environment that feels held. As this awareness settles, there is no need to visualize exact measurements or numbers. The feeling is enough. A space that resists extremes. A place where temperature drifts rather than swings. The forest remains present, quietly regulating its surroundings, allowing everything within it to exist at a pace that feels sustainable and calm. When attention lifts upward, the forest reveals another quiet structure. Not a single ceiling, but a layered arrangement that shapes how space feels from above. Forests are built vertically as much as they are spread across the ground. This vertical organization influences light, movement, and perception in subtle, calming ways. At the highest level is the canopy. This is where the crowns of mature trees meet, forming a loose roof of leaves and branches. From a distance, the canopy can appear solid and continuous. From below, it is open and irregular, filled with gaps that allow light to pass through in fragments. Sunlight does not arrive all at once. It filters downward, softened by leaves, arriving as shifting patterns rather than direct beams. This filtered light creates a gentle visual environment. Brightness is reduced, glare disappears, shadows soften and move slowly as branches sway. The eye does not need to adjust constantly. Instead, vision settles into a quieter mode, tracking gradual changes rather than sharp contrasts. This kind of light is easier to rest in, both for humans and for the many plants that grow beneath the canopy. Below the canopy lies the understory. This layer is made up of younger trees, shrubs, and plants adapted to lower light conditions. Growth here is slower and more measured. Leaves tend to be broader, designed to capture what light filters through. The understory fills space without crowding it, adding depth and texture without blocking movement. Between these layers, air moves gently. Heat rises, moisture circulates, and sound softens as it passes through leaves and branches. The vertical structure of the forest breaks energy into smaller pieces. Nothing travels straight through. Everything is slowed, redirected, or absorbed along the way. Light behaves differently in this environment than in open spaces. In forests, light scatters as it passes through multiple surfaces. Green wavelengths are reflected more strongly than others, bathing the space in muted green tones. This color dominance is easier for the human visual system to process. It reduces strain and encourages a softer focus, allowing attention to widen rather than sharpen. On the forest floor, light arrives intermittently. Patches of brightness appear and fade as the sun moves and leaves shift. This dynamic pattern keeps the environment gently engaging without becoming overwhelming. There is movement, but no urgency. Change happens slowly enough to be noticed without demanding reaction. This vertical layering also creates a sense of enclosure without confinement. The canopy suggests shelter, while the openness between trunks maintains spaciousness. Paths curve naturally, guided by roots and uneven ground. There is no straight line demanding speed. Movement becomes exploratory rather than directed. The structure above influences how the forest feels emotionally as well. Looking up into a canopy often draws attention away from immediate concerns. The height of trees introduces scale, while the complexity of branches encourages wandering focus. Thoughts tend to loosen, becoming less linear. The environment invites observation without interpretation. As this upward view settles in the imagination, there is no need to hold on to detail. Simply the sense of layers. Light arriving gently. Space shaped vertically as well as horizontally. The forest holds itself together through structure rather than force, creating an environment where light, air, and attention can move at their own pace, unhurried and calm. When attention lowers from the canopy to the ground beneath, the forest reveals a different kind of activity, less visible, less dramatic, but constant. The forest floor is not an empty surface waiting to be crossed. It is one of the most active layers of the entire ecosystem, quietly working beneath fallen leaves and branches. The ground of a forest is covered in leaf litter, twigs, bark, needles, and decaying wood. This layer forms naturally as trees shed what they no longer need. Leaves fall each year. Branches drop during storms. Whole trees eventually return to the ground where they once stood. Nothing is cleared away. Everything remains, slowly becoming part of the forest itself. At first glance, this surface can appear still, but the forest floor is always in motion, just at a pace that resists notice. Leaves curl and soften. Wood darkens and breaks down. Moisture settles into tiny spaces between particles. These changes do not happen quickly, and they do not happen all at once. They unfold gradually, creating stability rather than disruption. Leaf litter acts as a protective layer. It shields the soil beneath from direct sunlight, reducing evaporation and helping moisture linger longer after rain. During colder seasons, it insulates the ground, protecting roots from sudden temperature changes. When rain falls, this layer slows the water before it reaches the soil, preventing compaction and erosion. The forest floor cushions the impact of weather, allowing the ground below to remain loose and breathable. Beneath this surface, decomposition begins its long work. Fallen leaves and wood break down over time, releasing nutrients back into the soil. This process is intentionally slow. Soft plant matter may decompose within a year or two, while harder wood can take decades. Different tree species decay at different rates, creating a varied landscape of textures and stages of breakdown across the forest floor. Fungi play a central role in this process. Their fine threads move through soil and wood, breaking down materials that other organisms cannot. One of these materials is lignin, a tough structural component of wood. Without fungi, fallen trees would remain largely unchanged, piling up across the forest. With fungi present, wood gradually softens, collapses, and returns its nutrients to the earth. As decomposition continues, nutrients are released in small amounts rather than all at once. Nitrogen, carbon, and minerals seep into the soil slowly, feeding roots and microorganisms nearby. This steady release prevents overload and supports consistent growth. The forest does not fertilize itself in bursts. It feeds itself continuously, maintaining balance through patience. The forest floor also creates habitat. Fallen logs provide shelter for insects, birds, amphibians, and small mammals. Decaying wood holds moisture, offering refuge during dry periods. Dead trees often support more life than living ones, hosting beetles, fungi, and microbes that rely on decay. In forests, life and decomposition are not opposites. They are partners. Below the surface, soil becomes densely alive. A single handful of healthy forest soil contains billions of microorganisms. Bacteria, fungi, and tiny invertebrates interact constantly, processing organic matter and maintaining soil structure. This activity produces a familiar earthy scent, often noticed after rain. That smell comes from a compound called geosmin, released by microbes as they work. It is the scent of ongoing renewal. None of this activity announces itself. There is no visible marker for when nutrients return to the soil or when decomposition reaches completion. The forest floor operates quietly without signaling progress. Day and night, season after season, this layer continues its work. Standing above it, the importance of the forest floor can be easy to overlook. But without it, growth would slow, soil would erode, and nutrients would remain locked away. The entire forest depends on this ground-level system, functioning without direction or observation. As this awareness settles, the image can remain simple. Leaves resting where they fell, wood softening over time, soil receiving what the forest releases. Life continuing beneath your feet, steady and unhurried. The forest holds itself together from the ground up, supported by processes that do not need attention to persist. Beneath the forest floor, beyond what sight can reach, another forest exists. It does not rise upward or spread outward. It moves through soil, slowly and quietly, connecting roots, fungi, insects, and microorganisms into a living network that operates without visibility or pause. Tree roots extend far beyond the trunks we see above ground. Some spread wide, others grow deep, responding to soil, moisture, and space rather than symmetry. As they grow, roots shape the soil around them, creating channels that guide water and air. These pathways remain even after roots die back, leaving behind structure that continues to influence movement underground. Roots rarely work alone. Many form partnerships with fungi, creating what are known as mycorrhizal networks. These fungi attach themselves to root systems, extending their reach far beyond what roots could manage on their own. In exchange for sugars produced by trees through photosynthesis, fungi help deliver water and nutrients gathered from the surrounding soil. This exchange happens continuously, without awareness, driven by proximity rather than intention. Through these networks, trees are indirectly connected to one another. Resources can move from one tree to another, guided by gradients of availability rather than conscious direction. Older, established trees may pass water or nutrients to younger trees growing in shade. Seedlings benefit from these shared connections, increasing their chances of survival in low-light environments. The forest does not grow as a collection of isolated individuals. It grows as an interconnected system. These underground relationships are not fixed or rigid. They shift as conditions change. When soil dries, networks redirect moisture. When nutrients become scarce, connections adjust. Fungi grow toward opportunity and withdraw from areas that no longer support them. The system remains flexible, responding slowly and continuously to its surroundings. Alongside roots and fungi, countless insects and microorganisms move through this underground space. Tiny invertebrates break down organic matter, while bacteria process nutrients at a microscopic scale. Their activity helps maintain soil structure, preventing compaction, and allowing water and air to circulate. The soil remains breathable, alive, and responsive. Much of this activity occurs continuously, day and night. Unlike above-ground life, which follows visible cycles of light and darkness, underground systems remain relatively constant. Temperature fluctuates less, moisture changes slowly. Processes continue whether or not the forest above is active or still. Growth does not pause when the surface quiets. Because these systems are hidden, they often go unnoticed. Walking through a forest, there is little indication of the vast activity beneath each step. Yet the stability of the forest depends on this unseen work. Trees remain upright because roots anchor them. Growth continues because nutrients move through soil and fungi. Water reaches leaves because underground pathways guide it upward. This hidden cooperation does not require harmony or balance in the emotional sense. It does not aim for fairness or efficiency. It simply functions, shaped by evolution and time. Some connections strengthen, others fade. The system adjusts without needing intervention or awareness. For the mind, there is something settling about knowing that essential work can happen without observation. The underground forest does not need to be monitored. It does not need recognition. It continues whether it is understood or ignored. This persistence offers a quiet contrast to systems that depend on constant input or correction. As this image settles, there is no need to visualize exact structures or pathways. Simply the sense of connection beneath the surface. Roots touching soil, fungi extending outward, nutrients moving gradually, life continuing quietly below, supporting everything above it. The forest does not rest on the surface alone. It is held from beneath by systems that operate in darkness and silence. And as attention drifts upward again, that unseen support can remain present in the background, steady and ongoing, asking nothing in return. Forests are not collections of separate lives gathered by chance. They function as communities, shaped by shared space, shared resources, and long-term coexistence. Every tree, plant, animal, and microorganism occupies a place within a larger web of interaction. Nothing exists entirely alone. Presence is always relational, even when it appears quiet or solitary. Across the planet, forests support the majority of life found on land. Around 80% of terrestrial biodiversity depends on forest ecosystems in some way. More than half of all known plant and animal species live among trees. In tropical forests, diversity reaches its highest concentration. A single hectare of rainforest can contain hundreds of different tree species, each with its own growth rhythm, leaf shape, and ecological role. Many species remain undocumented, living entire lifespans without ever being named or recorded. This density does not create chaos. Instead, forests organize diversity through layering and timing. Different species occupy different niches. Some thrive in full sunlight, growing quickly when gaps appear in the canopy. Others are adapted to shade, growing slowly beneath taller trees. Some animals move primarily through the canopy, others along the forest floor, and many travel between layers depending on season or need. The same space supports multiple lives by offering variation rather than uniformity. Interactions within forest communities are often subtle. Pollinators move quietly between flowers. Birds disperse seeds without intention. Insects feed on leaves, shaping plant growth patterns. Predators regulate populations, preventing any one species from overwhelming the system. These interactions rarely announce themselves. They happen continuously, woven into daily movement and routine. Trees themselves participate in this community beyond their physical presence. Their leaves provide food. Their branches offer shelter. Their trunks become pathways for insects and nesting sites for birds. When trees fall, they do not leave the community. They become part of it in a different form, supporting decomposers and ground-dwelling life. Even in death, trees continue to contribute. Animals rely on forests not only for food, but for orientation and safety. Trees serve as landmarks, boundaries, and refuge. Canopies provide protection from predators. Dense undergrowth offers concealment. Seasonal changes in forests guide migration and behavior. Many species time breeding, movement, and rest according to forest rhythms rather than external signals. These relationships are not static. Forest communities shift over time. Species move in response to climate, disturbance, and competition. Some populations grow while others decline. New species arrive. Others disappear. Yet the overall system maintains continuity, adapting without abrupt collapse. Change is absorbed gradually, spread across many interactions rather than concentrated in a single point. Human cultures have long recognized this sense of shared space. Across civilizations, forests have appeared in myths, stories, and traditions as places of connection and transformation. They have provided food, medicine, shelter, and materials for millennia. Traditional knowledge about forests was often passed down orally, embedded in daily practices rather than written records. People learned not just what forests contained, but how to move within them respectfully and attentively. Even today, humans remain part of forest communities, whether directly or indirectly. Urban forests improve air quality and reduce heat, supporting human health within cities. Protected forests preserve biodiversity and stabilize ecosystems far beyond their boundaries. Many communities rely on forests for clean water, climate regulation, and cultural identity, often without seeing the full network of support involved. What makes forest communities distinctive is not harmony in the emotional sense, but coexistence through balance. No species controls the system. No single role dominates. Life overlaps, intersects, and adjusts. Competition exists, but so does cooperation. Both are integrated into a larger pattern that persists through time. For the mind, this layered interdependence can feel grounding. The idea that life does not need to be singular or isolated to be complete. That shared space can support difference without conflict. Forests demonstrate that complexity does not require noise or speed. It can exist quietly, maintained through countless small interactions rather than grand gestures. As this understanding settles, there is no need to remember specific numbers or species. The impression is enough. A forest as a shared place. Many lives moving through the same space, each following its own rhythm, each supported by the presence of others. A living community that continues whether or not it is observed, steady and ongoing, inviting rest simply by existing together. Time moves differently inside a forest, and nowhere is this more apparent than within the trees themselves. While days and seasons pass visibly across the forest floor, trees record time quietly, layer by layer, without memory or awareness. Growth happens slowly enough that it often escapes notice, yet it leaves behind a precise and lasting trace. Most trees add a thin layer of growth each year. This growth forms a ring beneath the bark, circling the trunk like a silent record. 1 ring per year, no exceptions. Wide rings mark years when conditions were favorable, when water was plentiful and temperatures were mild. Narrow rings reflect more difficult periods, when drought, cold, or stress slowed growth. Without intention, trees record the story of their environment, 1 year at a time. These rings do not fade. They remain preserved within the wood long after the conditions that shaped them have passed. Scientists study these patterns to understand climates that existed long before written records. Through this field, known as dendrochronology, forests become archives. They hold evidence of rainfall patterns, temperature shifts, volcanic eruptions, and extended droughts. A tree does not interpret these events. It simply grows in response to them, leaving behind a timeline written in wood. Growth itself is measured and patient. Some tree species expand their trunks by only a few millimeters each year. Others grow even more slowly, especially in colder or drier regions. In boreal forests, growth may pause almost entirely during long winters, resuming briefly when conditions allow. Each season contributes only a small addition, yet over decades and centuries, these additions accumulate into towering forms. Some trees live far longer than human lifespans. Bristlecone pines, for example, can live for thousands of years, quietly adding rings long after civilizations have risen and fallen. These trees do not grow quickly. Their longevity comes from restraint rather than speed. They endure by conserving energy, growing slowly, and responding gently to change. Inside the forest, this slow pace influences everything around it. Trees do not hurry to reach full size. They adapt to shade, competition, and available space. Younger trees may spend decades growing beneath a canopy before ever reaching direct sunlight. During this time, they remain alive but restrained, waiting without anticipation. Growth is possible, but it is not demanded. This patience shapes the structure of the forest. Taller trees reflect long histories of uninterrupted growth. Smaller trees may be just as old, shaped by limited light or crowded conditions. Size does not always indicate age. Time is distributed unevenly, expressed differently depending on circumstance. From a human perspective, this scale of time can feel disorienting. Days and years tend to carry urgency. Deadlines approach. Progress is measured quickly. In contrast, trees operate on a timeline that resists compression. They respond to years rather than moments. Change unfolds slowly enough to feel almost still. This slowness can be calming to the mind. When surrounded by organisms that do not rush, there is less pressure to track time precisely. Attention softens. The sense of urgency loosens. Being among trees can create the impression that there is more time than expected, even when the clock remains unchanged. The forest does not speed up to match human pacing. It invites slowing instead. Rings accumulate whether anyone watches or not. Growth continues whether it is noticed or measured. Trees do not reflect on the past or anticipate the future. They exist fully within each season, responding only to what is present. As this understanding settles, the idea of time can be allowed to expand, not stretched thin, but widened. Years stacked gently within wood. Seasons recorded without commentary. Growth happening quietly, without comparison or expectation. There is no need to remember how many rings a tree holds or how old it might be. The impression is enough. Time passing patiently, change unfolding without urgency. Trees standing as reminders that continuity does not require speed. Within the forest, time is not something that runs out. It accumulates, layer by layer, ring by ring, always moving forward, but never in a hurry. Long before humans walked beneath branches or named the shapes of leaves, forests already existed. Their presence on Earth reaches back hundreds of millions of years, to a time when land itself was still learning how to hold life. These early forests did not resemble the ones we know today, but they laid the foundation for everything that followed. The first forests appeared during the Devonian period, around 385 million years ago. Before this, land plants were small and close to the ground. The emergence of trees changed the planet in quiet but lasting ways. Roots reached deeper into soil, stabilizing land that had once eroded easily. Trunks rose upward, lifting leaves into the air and expanding the surface available for photosynthesis. Forests transformed the structure of the land by simply growing into it. As these ancient forests spread, they altered Earth's atmosphere. Through photosynthesis, early trees absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen, gradually increasing oxygen levels in the air. This shift did not happen quickly. It unfolded over millions of years, reshaping the chemical balance of the planet. Higher oxygen concentrations made it possible for larger, more complex organisms to evolve, both on land and in the oceans. Forests did not intend this change. It emerged naturally from their presence. These early ecosystems were not stable in the modern sense. Forests advanced and retreated in response to shifting climates, continental movement, and mass extinctions. Ice ages came and went. Seas rose and fell, yet forests persisted, adapting slowly, changing form while maintaining continuity. Some lineages disappeared, while others survived by adjusting their growth patterns, leaf structures, and reproductive strategies. Over time, forests became increasingly complex. Layers developed, species diversified, relationships between plants, fungi, and animals deepened. What began as simple stands of early trees evolved into intricate systems capable of supporting vast biodiversity. This evolution was gradual, driven by small advantages repeated over long stretches of time rather than sudden leaps. Some forests today retain elements of this deep history. Old forests that have remained relatively unchanged for thousands of years carry structures shaped by centuries of uninterrupted growth. Trees of different ages stand together. Spacing becomes irregular. Canopies form uneven patterns, reflecting generations of growth and decay. These forests do not follow uniform designs. They reflect time rather than planning. Ancient forests also remind us that stability does not mean immobility. Even forests that appear unchanged are constantly adjusting. Trees fall. New growth fills gaps. Species composition shifts slowly. Change occurs without erasing continuity. The forest remains recognizable even as its internal details evolve. Standing among trees that have lived for centuries can alter how time is perceived. These trees have experienced climates, storms, and seasons that stretch far beyond human memory. They have grown through periods when human societies were just beginning to form. Their presence offers a sense of depth that cannot be compressed into a single lifetime. This depth can feel grounding rather than overwhelming. Forests do not demand reflection on the past. They simply hold it. Their existence does not depend on being remembered or understood. They continue whether or not their history is acknowledged. For the mind, ancient forests offer a different relationship with time. Urgency feels misplaced here. There is no expectation of quick change or immediate outcome. Growth unfolds across centuries. Adaptation happens slowly. Presence is enough. As this understanding settles, the forest can be seen not as a backdrop to human history, but as a constant thread running alongside it. Long before humans arrived, forests shaped the air, soil, and climate that made life possible. And long after any single generation passes, forests continue, carrying time forward in wood and root and soil. There is no need to trace every era or remember every shift. The impression remains. Forests as enduring participants in Earth's story, quietly shaping the planet through patience rather than force. Always present, always becoming. Some forests reach a stage where change becomes slower, deeper, and more layered. These are often called old-growth forests, not because they are finished, but because they have been allowed to continue without interruption for long periods of time. Old-growth forests are places where growth has accumulated rather than been reset, where structure reflects centuries instead of decades. An old-growth forest is not defined by the age of a single tree. It is defined by continuity. These forests have never been fully cleared or logged. Instead, they have developed gradually, shaped by time, weather, and natural disturbance rather than human planning. As a result, their structure becomes complex in ways that cannot be recreated quickly. Trees in old-growth forests vary widely in size and age. Young trees grow alongside very old ones. Some trunks are thick and towering. Others are thin and twisted, shaped by years of limited light or competition. Spacing is irregular. Paths are not straight. The forest does not follow a pattern that can be easily predicted. It reflects history rather than design. This structural complexity creates stability. Layers of vegetation overlap. Canopies form uneven roofs that allow light to reach the forest floor in shifting patterns. Fallen trees remain where they fall, becoming part of the ground layer rather than being removed. These elements create a resilient environment, one that absorbs change rather than amplifying it. Old-growth forests store large amounts of carbon. Over centuries, carbon accumulates not only in living trees, but also in dead wood, roots, and soil. Unlike younger forests, where growth and carbon uptake happen rapidly but fluctuate, mature forests hold carbon steadily. Storage becomes long-term. Release happens slowly. The forest acts as a reservoir, smoothing out changes that might otherwise happen too quickly. Growth in these forests does not stop, but it changes character. Trees grow more slowly. Energy is conserved rather than spent on rapid expansion. The forest invests in maintenance rather than acceleration. This slower pace contributes to longevity. Trees withstand storms, droughts, and seasonal stress by growing conservatively, responding rather than pushing. When trees in old-growth forests die, they do not disrupt the system. Death is expected, integrated, and necessary. Gaps open in the canopy. Light reaches the forest floor. Seedlings begin growing in shaded conditions, waiting patiently for space to open. Regeneration happens quietly, without urgency. The forest replaces itself gradually, maintaining continuity across generations. This balance between growth and decay gives old-growth forests a distinctive atmosphere. The air feels settled. Sound is softened. Temperature changes feel gradual. The space does not feel optimized or managed. It feels inhabited by time itself. Nothing appears rushed. Nothing feels unfinished. For the mind, this maturity can be deeply calming. There is no sense of striving here. No visible effort to become something else. The forest exists fully as it is, shaped by everything it has already experienced. Imperfections are not corrected. Variations are not removed. They are held. Old-growth forests also remind us that stability does not come from control. It comes from allowing systems to adjust on their own timescales. Interference is minimal. Change is absorbed rather than resisted. Complexity builds naturally when processes are allowed to continue without interruption. As this awareness settles, there is no need to label or classify what makes a forest old or mature. The feeling is enough. A space where time has layered itself gently, where growth continues without urgency, where decay does not signal loss, but renewal. Old-growth forests are not monuments. They are ongoing systems. They persist not because they are protected from change, but because they have learned how to carry it. And in their presence, it becomes easier to imagine steadiness that does not depend on speed or perfection, only patience and continuity. Forests are often imagined as stable, unchanging places. But change is built into their structure, not as interruption, but as renewal. Disturbance is not separate from forest life. It is one of the ways forests continue. Some forest ecosystems rely on natural disturbances to regenerate. Fire is one of the most misunderstood of these processes. In many regions, low-intensity fires have occurred for thousands of years, moving slowly across the forest floor, clearing leaf litter and small plants without destroying mature trees. These fires do not erase forests. They reshape them gently, opening space for new growth. Certain tree species are adapted specifically to fire. Thick bark protects living tissue from heat. Some cones remain sealed until exposed to high temperatures, releasing seeds only after a fire has passed. In these forests, fire is not an ending. It is a signal, a reset that clears space without removing continuity. Not all disturbance involves fire. Windstorms can topple trees. Heavy snow can break branches. Insects may weaken certain species during specific cycles. When a tree falls, it creates a gap in the canopy. Light reaches the forest floor, where it did not before. This change is localized, contained, and temporary. These gaps are invitations rather than damage. Sunlight allows seedlings and shade-tolerant plants to grow more quickly. Species that were waiting quietly beneath the canopy begin to stretch upward. Growth accelerates briefly, filling space that opened naturally. Over time, the gap closes again, returning the forest to a darker, cooler state. This gradual progression is known as forest succession. After a disturbance, early-stage forests tend to be brighter and denser, filled with smaller plants growing rapidly. As time passes, competition increases. Taller trees emerge. Light becomes more limited. The forest slowly transitions toward a more mature structure. Succession does not follow a rigid schedule. It adapts to local conditions. Soil quality, moisture, climate, and species availability all shape how renewal unfolds. Some forests recover in decades. Others take centuries. Recovery is not about returning to an exact previous state. It is about re-establishing balance through change. Even in forests that appear untouched, renewal is ongoing. Trees die naturally as part of their life cycle. When they fall, they create small disturbances that ripple outward without overwhelming the system. Growth and decay happen simultaneously. Nothing waits for one phase to finish before another begins. This balance prevents stagnation. Without disturbance, forests would eventually become less diverse, dominated by fewer species adapted to stable conditions. Small disruptions create variation, allowing multiple species to coexist across different stages of growth. Diversity is maintained through change, not despite it. For the mind, this understanding reframes change itself. Disturbance does not have to mean loss. It can mean space. It can mean opportunity for renewal without erasure. Forests demonstrate that systems can absorb disruption without collapsing, adjusting gradually rather than reacting sharply. Importantly, forest disturbance does not feel urgent from within the system. A fallen tree does not signal failure. A burned patch does not indicate harm. These events are folded into long-term patterns that extend far beyond any single moment. The forest does not rush to repair itself. It allows recovery to unfold at its own pace. This patience creates resilience. By spreading change over time and space, forests avoid extremes. No single event defines the system. Renewal happens quietly, through small shifts rather than dramatic reversals. As this idea settles, the image can remain gentle. A tree fallen, light reaching the ground, small plants growing where shade once held. Over years, the canopy returning. Change happening without urgency, without judgment. Forests do not resist change, and they do not chase perfection. They balance growth and decay over long timescales, allowing renewal to emerge naturally. Even when the forest appears still, it is already adapting. And in that slow adaptation, continuity is preserved. Nothing needs to be restored all at once. Nothing needs to return to how it was before. The forest continues by changing, and in doing so, it remains whole. Forests are often described as quiet, but they are not silent. Sound exists everywhere within them. It simply behaves differently. Instead of sharp, echoing noise, forests tend to soften sound, spreading it out and lowering its intensity. The result is an environment where sound blends into the background rather than demanding attention. Dense vegetation plays a central role in this effect. Leaves, branches, trunks, and undergrowth interrupt sound waves as they move through the forest. Rather than traveling in straight lines, sound is absorbed, scattered, and redirected. Hard surfaces, that cause echoes in open or built environments are largely absent. What remains is a soundscape that feels diffuse and gentle. This acoustic softness shapes how the forest is experienced. Wind moving through leaves creates low, continuous tones rather than sudden bursts. Birds call intermittently, often at a distance, their sounds layered rather than isolated. Insects add subtle rhythmic textures, especially during warmer seasons. None of these sounds dominate. They coexist without competing for focus. Because sound is dispersed, forests tend to feel quieter than open landscapes, even when activity is present. Noise does not build up, it dissolves quickly. This creates a sense of space, allowing the mind to rest without needing to filter or prioritize input. Attention does not have to remain alert, it can drift. Snow-covered forests demonstrate this effect even more clearly. Snow absorbs sound efficiently, reducing the reflection of noise. In winter forests, footsteps feel muted. Movement becomes quieter. The absence of sharp sound contributes to a feeling of stillness, even when the forest remains alive beneath the surface. Scientific studies have shown that natural forest sounds can lower heart rate and reduce stress in humans. This response is not tied to specific noises, but to the overall pattern. Forest soundscapes are typically low in frequency and predictable in rhythm. There are few abrupt changes. This consistency allows the nervous system to settle. The lack of sudden noise also changes how space is perceived. In quieter environments, distance feels greater. Sound does not collapse space by bouncing back quickly. Instead, it fades as it travels, reinforcing a sense of depth. This contributes to the impression that forests are larger and more expansive than they appear visually. Silence in forests is rarely absolute. There is almost always some movement of air, some distant call, some subtle shift. But because these sounds are gentle and intermittent, they blend into a kind of auditory background. Silence becomes not the absence of sound, but the absence of demand. This distinction matters. In many modern environments, silence can feel tense, as if something is missing or about to happen. In forests, quiet feels full. It carries texture and continuity. There is no expectation that sound must fill the space. The space holds itself. For the mind, this environment offers relief. Without constant auditory stimulation, the brain reduces its scanning behavior. There is less need to interpret or react. Thoughts slow. Breathing often deepens. The body responds before conscious awareness catches up. Forest soundscapes also change gradually rather than abruptly. Morning brings different tones than midday. Evening introduces softer, lower sounds. At night, the forest becomes even quieter, not because life stops, but because sound travels differently. Darkness absorbs attention, and noise recedes further into the background. These shifts happen without cues or announcements. There is no clear boundary marking when one soundscape ends and another begins. The transition is gradual, almost unnoticeable. This gradual change further supports relaxation, allowing the listener to remain settled as time passes. As this understanding settles, there is no need to focus on identifying sounds. It is enough to sense the softness, the way noise does not linger, the way quiet feels spacious rather than empty. the way sound becomes part of the environment instead of standing apart from it. The forest does not demand silence, and it does not produce noise for effect. It allows sound to exist without dominance. In doing so, it creates a space where listening becomes effortless and where rest can emerge naturally from the absence of urgency. Here, sound and silence are not opposites. They blend together, shaping an environment that supports calm simply by how it carries what little noise remains. Air in a forest feels different, even before the reason is understood. Breathing often becomes slower. The chest softens. Attention drifts outward rather than tightening inward. This shift is not imagined. Forest air carries subtle qualities shaped by trees, soil, moisture, and time, creating an environment that feels supportive without asking for effort. Trees constantly interact with the air around them. Through photosynthesis, they absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, contributing to breathable air on a continuous basis. This exchange happens quietly, leaf by leaf, without pause. Oxygen disperses gently, mixing with surrounding air, rather than arriving in noticeable bursts. The forest does not produce air for a moment. It maintains it steadily. Beyond oxygen, trees release organic compounds into the atmosphere known as phytoncides. These compounds are part of trees' natural defense systems, helping protect against insects, fungi, and disease. Once released, phytoncides drift through the forest air, interacting with everything that moves through it. They are invisible and subtle, yet measurable in their effects. Research has shown that breathing air rich in phytoncides can be associated with reduced levels of cortisol, the hormone linked to stress. This response does not require conscious focus or intention. Simply being present in the environment is enough. The body responds before the mind has time to evaluate what is happening. Forest air also tends to be cleaner than air in densely built environments. Leaves trap particulate matter. Soil absorbs pollutants. Air moves more slowly, allowing particles to settle rather than remain suspended. In cities, urban forests improve air quality by filtering pollutants and moderating heat. Even small patches of trees can influence the air that moves through them. Moisture plays a role as well. Water released from leaves through transpiration increases humidity slightly, preventing air from becoming too dry. This moisture carries scent and temperature, softening the air's texture. Breathing feels easier. The throat and lungs experience less irritation. The air feels alive rather than processed. Scent in forests is rarely strong or singular. It emerges as a blend. Earthy notes from soil, green freshness from leaves, subtle sweetness from flowers or sap. After rain, these scents become more noticeable as moisture lifts compounds from the ground and vegetation. The familiar earthy smell, often noticed in forests, comes from microbial activity in soil, signaling ongoing life beneath the surface. These scents do not linger aggressively. They fade and return gently, shaped by airflow and temperature. There is no single aroma to focus on. Instead, scent becomes part of the background, offering sensory information without demand. The nose does not need to identify or analyze. It can simply receive. This quality of forest air affects attention. Without harsh smells or dry conditions, the body reduces its alert response. Breathing patterns slow naturally. Inhalations deepen slightly. Exhalations lengthen. These shifts happen without instruction, guided by the environment rather than conscious control. The Japanese practice known as forest bathing emphasizes this kind of presence. It is not exercise and not meditation. It is slow exposure, moving gently through forest air, allowing the body to absorb the environment without goal or expectation. Studies suggest that even brief time spent in such conditions can improve focus and mental clarity. Importantly, these effects do not depend on belief. Even images of forests can trigger calming responses, suggesting that the association between forest air and relaxation is deeply ingrained. The body recognizes these conditions as supportive before the mind engages. As this understanding settles, there is no need to hold on to specific compounds or mechanisms. The feeling is enough. Air that feels soft, breath that moves easily, scent that remains subtle and blended. The forest does not try to calm. It simply creates conditions where calm can emerge. Breathing here does not feel like a task. It feels like participation. The air moves in and out, carrying traces of leaves, soil, and time. Nothing needs to be adjusted. Nothing needs to be improved. The forest air continues to circulate, steady and quiet, offering space for the body and mind to rest without effort. Light inside a forest behaves differently than it does in open spaces. It does not arrive all at once, and it does not insist on attention. Instead, it filters, scatters, and settles into the environment in a way that changes how vision functions and how focus is held. This subtle shift in light has a quiet influence on the mind, shaping perception without being noticed directly. As sunlight passes through layers of leaves and branches, it breaks apart. Direct beams soften into fragments. Brightness is reduced, glare disappears, and contrast lowers. Shadows are present, but they are gentle and irregular rather than sharp and defined. The eye does not have to adjust rapidly. It moves comfortably between light and shade, guided by gradual transitions instead of sudden extremes. This filtered light reduces visual strain. In environments with harsh lighting or strong contrast, the visual system works continuously to adapt. Pupils constrict and widen. Muscles around the eyes remain engaged. In forests, these demands lessen. Light arrives evenly, allowing the eyes to relax into a more natural rhythm. Vision becomes less about scanning and more about receiving. Green wavelengths dominate the forest environment. Leaves reflect green light more than other colors, filling the space with muted tones that are easier for the human eye to process. Green sits near the center of the visible spectrum, requiring less effort for the visual system to interpret. This may be one reason forests feel visually calming even without conscious awareness. Because of this, attention behaves differently among trees. Rather than locking onto single points, focus widens. The mind becomes less analytical and more observational. Details are noticed without being isolated. Movement is registered without urgency. There is space to see without needing to interpret immediately. This softer focus has measurable effects. Studies suggest that forest environments can improve concentration and mental clarity, particularly after periods of prolonged focus or cognitive effort. Unlike environments that demand constant attention, forests allow the mind to recover by offering visual complexity without overload. The way light shifts throughout the day also contributes to this effect. Morning light enters the forest at low angles, creating long, gentle shadows. Midday light filters more directly but remains diffused. Evening light softens again, becoming warmer and lower. These changes happen gradually, without abrupt transitions. The eye adjusts naturally, guided by the environment rather than forced by artificial lighting. Movement within the forest further shapes perception. Paths curve. Trees interrupt sight lines. Depth is revealed slowly rather than instantly. This unpredictability keeps attention lightly engaged without triggering alertness. The mind remains present but not tense. This balance between engagement and rest is important. Environments that are too uniform can feel dull, while those that are too stimulating can feel overwhelming. Forests sit between these extremes. They offer variation without chaos. Light shifts without startling. Vision remains active without strain. For the mind, this creates a sense of ease. Thoughts slow not because effort is applied, but because fewer inputs demand immediate response. There is less need to evaluate, categorize, or prioritize what is seen. Visual information flows steadily, allowing awareness to remain open rather than focused tightly. Even stillness feels different under forest light. Standing quietly, the environment continues to change. Leaves move slightly. Light shifts subtly. Nothing remains frozen. Yet these movements are slow enough to feel soothing rather than distracting. As this understanding settles, there is no need to analyze how light works or why it feels calming. The experience itself is enough. Softer brightness, gentle contrast, green tones filling the space, focus widening naturally. The forest does not ask the eyes to work harder. It allows them to rest while remaining engaged. And in that balance, attention finds a quieter rhythm, one that does not demand precision or speed, only presence. As daylight fades, forests do not become inactive. They change rhythm. Night does not arrive as a switch being flipped, but as a gradual dimming that reshapes how the forest feels and functions. Light withdraws slowly, colors soften, edges blur. The forest transitions into a different state, quieter on the surface, but still deeply alive. When darkness settles beneath the canopy, light is absorbed rather than reflected. Trees and undergrowth limit artificial glow, creating deep natural darkness. Unlike open landscapes or urban spaces, forests prevent light from traveling far. Shadows deepen. The sky becomes less intrusive. This darkness supports biological rhythms, guiding animals and plants according to cycles older than artificial timekeeping. Many forest animals are nocturnal, becoming more active after sunset. Insects emerge. Small mammals move through undergrowth. Predators rely on sound and scent rather than sight. These activities are rarely obvious. Movement happens low to the ground or within dense cover. Life continues without drawing attention to itself. Temperature shifts more slowly in forests at night than in open areas. Tree cover traps heat close to the ground, preventing rapid cooling. As a result, Nighttime temperatures inside forests tend to remain more stable. The air feels cooler, but not sharply cold. This gradual change reduces stress on plants and animals, allowing them to remain active or resting without sudden adjustment. The forest floor remains active after dark. Decomposers continue their work beneath fallen leaves. Insects move through soil and wood. Microbial activity persists without pause. Night does not stop processes. It simply removes visibility. The forest's essential systems continue whether they are seen or not. Darkness also plays a role in regulating circadian rhythms. Many animals depend on the absence of light to guide sleep, feeding, and movement. In forests, darkness is consistent and reliable. Light pollution is limited. Cycles remain intact. This stability supports healthy biological timing across species. Sound changes at night as well. With less wind and fewer daytime birds, the forest becomes quieter. Sounds that remain tend to be softer and more spaced out. A distant call, the rustle of leaves, an occasional movement through undergrowth. These sounds do not cluster. They arrive intermittently, allowing silence to fill the space between them. For humans, forest darkness can feel grounding rather than unsettling. Without constant visual input, attention turns inward gently. The eyes relax. The body becomes more aware of temperature, breath, and posture. The absence of light reduces stimulation, making rest feel more accessible. Importantly, the forest does not require activity to justify the night. There is no expectation of productivity. Growth continues slowly. Rest is honored. Energy is conserved. Even evergreen trees, which remain green year-round, reduce activity during colder, darker periods, continuing photosynthesis at a slower pace rather than stopping entirely. Fallen leaves on the forest floor insulate soil at night, protecting roots from temperature extremes. This layer helps maintain warmth and moisture, creating a stable environment beneath the surface. What appears quiet above remains supported below. As night deepens, the forest holds its form without visibility. Trees remain present even when unseen. Paths continue even when not followed. The environment does not disappear when light leaves it. It simply exists differently. For the mind, this can feel like permission. Permission to rest without explanation, to release the need to observe or understand. Darkness removes detail, allowing awareness to soften rather than sharpen. There is no need to imagine every sound or movement. The impression is enough. A forest at night, cool air held gently between trunks, darkness absorbing edges, life continuing quietly beneath the surface. Nothing needs to happen here. Nothing needs to be completed. The forest remains steady and rhythmic, carrying night forward without urgency. Forests move through time in cycles rather than straight lines. Instead of pushing constantly forward, they return again and again to familiar patterns, each season offering a different form of activity, rest, and conservation. These changes are not abrupt. They arrive gradually, giving the forest time to adjust without strain. In temperate forests, seasons are especially visible. Spring begins quietly. Buds swell. Small leaves unfold. Growth resumes after months of restraint. Energy that was stored during colder periods is released carefully, directed toward new shoots and fresh tissue. Nothing rushes. Even in renewal, the forest remains measured. Summer brings fullness. Canopies thicken. Light becomes more filtered. Photosynthesis reaches its peak as leaves convert sunlight into stored energy. Growth is steady rather than explosive. Trees focus on strengthening existing structures, expanding root systems, and supporting surrounding life. The forest feels alive but not hurried. Autumn introduces a different rhythm. Deciduous trees prepare for colder months by shedding leaves. This process is not decay in the destructive sense. It is conservation. By releasing leaves, trees reduce water loss and protect themselves from freezing temperatures. Nutrients are pulled back into branches and trunks before leaves fall, stored safely for future use. As leaves descend, they return nutrients to the forest floor. What was once part of the canopy becomes part of the ground layer, feeding soil and microorganisms. Autumn is not an ending. It is a transfer. Energy moves downward, settling into the systems that will sustain the forest through winter. Winter slows visible activity, but it does not hold life. Deciduous trees rest, conserving energy within their wood and roots. Growth pauses, but systems remain intact. Evergreen trees, by contrast, retain their needles year-round. These needles are adapted to cold, reducing water loss and allowing limited photosynthesis to continue even during winter months. Evergreen forests remain green, not because they ignore winter, but because they are adapted to move through it. Snow, where present, becomes part of the cycle. It insulates the forest floor, protecting soil and roots from extreme cold. Sound is absorbed. Movement quiets. Beneath the surface, microorganisms continue working slowly, maintaining soil structure and nutrient balance. The forest does not become empty, it becomes restrained. These seasonal shifts are not experienced as separate phases by the forest itself. They blend into one another. Boundaries soften. There is no exact moment when one season ends and another begins. Change happens gradually, allowing trees, animals, and soil to adjust without shock. In tropical forests, seasonal cycles take a different form. Temperature remains relatively stable, but rainfall patterns shift. Wet and dry periods guide growth, flowering, and fruiting. Trees respond not to cold, but to moisture. Leaves may drop during dry seasons to conserve water, then return when rains resume. The principle remains the same. Conservation followed by renewal. Across all forest types, cycles serve the same purpose. They regulate energy use. They prevent exhaustion. Growth is balanced with rest. Activity is paired with recovery. Nothing is expected to operate at full capacity all the time. This cyclical pacing supports resilience. Forests that move through regular periods of restraint are better prepared to handle stress. Stored energy allows recovery after disturbance. Adaptation happens over seasons rather than moments. The forest remains flexible because it does not demand constant output. For the mind, these cycles offer a different way of understanding time. Progress does not have to mean constant forward motion. Rest is not failure. Slowing down is not loss. Forests demonstrate that stepping back can be part of continuity rather than interruption. The repetition of seasons also reduces uncertainty. Even though conditions change, the overall pattern remains familiar. Leaves fall, leaves return. Growth pauses, growth resumes. This predictability creates stability without monotony. Each cycle brings variation, but within a trusted framework. Standing among trees that have lived through hundreds of these cycles can subtly alter how urgency feels. Deadlines soften. The sense of needing to be constantly active loosens. The forest does not judge productivity by speed. It measures success by persistence. As this understanding settles, there is no need to track which season comes next. The idea itself is enough. Movement followed by rest. Expansion followed by conservation. A rhythm that supports longevity rather than intensity. Forests do not fight the passing of seasons. They move with them. They release when needed. They store when required. They wait without anxiety. And in doing so, they continue year after year, cycle after cycle, steady and whole. Long before forests were studied, measured, or managed, they were lived within. Human relationships with forests did not begin as abstract ideas. They began as daily experience. Shelter found beneath branches, food gathered from the ground, paths worn slowly into soil by repeated movement. Forests were not separate from human life. They were part of it. Across cultures and civilizations, forests have shaped how people survived and how they understood the world. Trees provided wood for fire, tools, and shelter. Plants offered medicine, fibers, and nourishment. Animals living among trees became sources of food, clothing, and materials. Knowledge of these resources was learned gradually through observation and repetition rather than written instruction. This knowledge was often passed down orally. Stories, rituals, and seasonal practices carried information across generations. People learned when certain plants could be gathered safely, which trees provided reliable materials, how forests changed through the year. This understanding was not framed as ownership. It was framed as relationship. Humans adapted to forests rather than reshaping them completely. In many ancient societies, forests were considered sacred spaces, not because they were untouched, but because they were powerful and unpredictable. Dense trees limited sight lines. Sounds traveled differently. Light behaved in unfamiliar ways. Forests evoked awe and caution at the same time. They became places associated with transformation, refuge, and mystery. Myths and stories across cultures often place forests at moments of transition. Characters enter forests to be tested, changed, or hidden from the ordinary world. These stories reflect lived experience. Forests can disorient and ground at once. They remove familiar reference points while offering protection and sustenance. Human imagination absorbed these qualities naturally. Even as societies grew more settled and agricultural, forests remained essential. They bordered villages and fields. They supplied materials that open land could not. People learned to manage forest edges carefully, harvesting without fully clearing. Practices varied widely depending on climate, species, and culture, but the principle remained similar. Survival depended on continuity. This relationship was not always gentle. Forests were cut, burned, and reshaped to meet immediate needs. But even then, long-term dependence encouraged restraint. Clear too much and water sources would suffer. Remove too many trees and soil would erode. Experience taught limits before science formalized them. As time passed, human relationships with forests shifted. Industrialization increased the scale of extraction. Forests became resources measured in volume rather than presence. Distance grew between people and the systems that supported them. Yet even in these changes, forests continued to influence human life quietly. Clean water, climate moderation, and air quality remain tied to forested land. In modern times, many people encounter forests less frequently, yet the connection has not disappeared. It shows up in recreation, conservation, and cultural memory. Forests are protected not only for practical reasons, but because they are valued. National parks, reserves, and protected lands reflect an understanding that some places are worth preserving beyond immediate use. Urban forests carry this relationship into cities. Trees planted along streets and in parks improve air quality, reduce heat, and soften sound. These benefits often go unnoticed, yet they shape daily life. Forests support human well-being even when they are fragmented and partially hidden. The human relationship with forests has never been static. It has adapted alongside changes in technology, population, and culture. What remains consistent is reliance. Even when forests are distant, they continue to support water systems, climate balance, and biodiversity that humans depend on. For the mind, remembering this long relationship can feel grounding. Humans are not separate observers of forests. They are participants, shaped by environments that existed long before modern structures. Forests have influenced human rhythm, imagination, and survival across millennia. There is no need to romanticize this connection or judge its changes. It is enough to recognize continuity. Forests have held space for humans across time, offering resources, shelter, and meaning. And even now, quietly and often invisibly, they continue to support life in ways that do not ask for recognition. As this understanding settles, the forest can be seen not as something humans visit, but as something that has always been present alongside them. A shared history, still unfolding, steady and ongoing. As human presence expanded, forests began to change in how they were approached. Some areas were used intensively, others were set aside. Over time, the idea of stewardship emerged. Not ownership in the strict sense, but responsibility. Managed and protected forests reflect an understanding that forests support human life in ways that are easy to overlook, yet difficult to replace. Managed forests are shaped by deliberate decisions. Trees may be harvested selectively rather than cleared entirely. Growth cycles are planned across decades rather than seasons. These forests are not untouched, but they are guided. The goal is continuity rather than extraction. Wood is taken while allowing the forest to regenerate and maintain structure. This form of management recognizes that forests are slow systems. Trees grow over decades. Soil develops over centuries. Water pathways adjust gradually. When management respects these timelines, forests remain functional. When timelines are ignored, recovery becomes difficult or impossible. Protected forests represent a different approach. These areas are preserved with minimal human interference. National parks, reserves, and conservation areas exist to safeguard biodiversity, watersheds, and long-term ecological stability. Protection is not based on perfection. It is based on allowance. The forest is given space to operate according to its own processes. One of the most significant roles of protected forests is water support. Forested watersheds filter rainfall as it moves through soil and root systems. This natural filtration produces cleaner water than deforested landscapes. Many cities rely on protected forests for their drinking water, often without daily awareness of that connection. Trees slow rainfall before it reaches the ground. Soil absorbs and stores water. Surface runoff is reduced. Groundwater is replenished gradually. These processes protect against floods and droughts alike. Infrastructure benefits quietly from systems that do not require machinery or maintenance schedules. Managed forests also contribute to these services when handled carefully. Root systems stabilize slopes. Vegetation reduces erosion. Even when trees are harvested, leaving enough structure intact preserves these protective functions. Forest management becomes a balance between use and preservation, rather than a choice between them. Urban forests extend this concept into human-dominated landscapes. Trees planted along streets and in parks improve air quality by filtering pollutants. They reduce heat buildup by providing shade and releasing moisture into the air. These benefits accumulate slowly, often going unnoticed, yet they influence daily comfort and health. Stewardship varies across cultures and regions. Traditional forest management practices often emphasize selective harvesting, seasonal use, and respect for regeneration cycles. Modern conservation science has, in many ways, returned to these principles, supported by data rather than tradition alone. Different paths have led to similar conclusions. Protection does not mean stillness. Even protected forests experience change. Trees fall, gaps open. New growth appears. Disturbances occur naturally. Protection allows these processes to unfold without forcing correction or optimization. The forest adapts on its own timescale. There is also recognition that not all forests can be preserved untouched. Human populations require materials, space, and resources. Managed forests acknowledge this reality while attempting to minimize long-term harm. The emphasis shifts from short-term yield to sustained function. For the mind, understanding managed and protected forests reframes conservation. It becomes less about freezing landscapes in time and more about maintaining systems that can continue supporting life. Stability is not the absence of change. It is the presence of balance. These forests often operate beyond direct observation. Water arrives clean at taps without visible connection to distant trees. Temperatures moderate without visible mechanisms. Air feels breathable without reminder of filtration happening across leaves and soil. Support systems remain hidden because they are effective. As attention rests here, there is no need to assign moral weight or urgency. Managed and protected forests simply exist as responses to long-term observation. They reflect what humans have learned through experience. That forests function best when allowed time, space, and restraint. In this way, stewardship becomes quiet rather than dramatic. It does not require constant intervention. It requires patience, planning, and trust in slow systems. Forests do the rest themselves. Settling into this idea, the forest appears less as a resource to manage and more as a partner in continuity. One that supports life steadily, whether acknowledged or not, through systems that unfold calmly and persist over time. Moving through a forest often changes perception before it changes thought. The shift is subtle. It begins with space. Trees alter how distance is measured. Dense trunks shorten sight lines. Curved paths remove long, straight views. The environment stops offering far horizons and instead presents near, layered depth. Attention adjusts without instruction. In open landscapes, the eye is drawn outward. Vision stretches ahead, scanning for endpoints and edges. In forests, that habit softens. There are fewer straight lines. Branches overlap. Light arrives in fragments. The eye settles closer to the body, responding to what is immediately present, rather than what lies far away. This change in visual structure influences movement. Steps slow naturally. Without long sight lines, speed becomes unnecessary. The body matches the environment. Pace adjusts not through conscious choice, but through reduced visual urgency. There is less reason to hurry when distance is no longer emphasized. Sound behaves similarly. Noise does not carry sharply. Vegetation absorbs and deflects sound waves, muting sudden contrasts. Instead of sharp echoes, forests offer continuous low-frequency background sounds. Wind moves through leaves. Insects hum. Occasional bird calls appear and fade. The auditory field becomes even without demanding attention. With fewer abrupt sensory signals, the nervous system receives less stimulation. This reduction does not feel like emptiness. It feels like space. The body is no longer required to filter as much information. Breathing often slows. Muscles loosen. The system shifts toward regulation rather than readiness. Time perception follows. Without strong external markers, time feels less segmented. Forests rarely display clocks, schedules, or linear progress cues. There are no straight roads signaling destination. Movement becomes cyclical rather than goal-oriented. Walking loops rather than advances. This alters how duration is felt. Moments stretch gently. Minutes feel longer, not because they are filled with more activity, but because attention is not constantly redirected. Presence deepens as distraction diminishes. The mind does not need to anticipate what comes next. It can remain with what is already here. This effect is not dependent on thought or intention. Even brief exposure to forest environments can create this shift. The sensory field itself guides the change. Curved paths reduce predictability. Irregular spacing keeps attention engaged without tension. The environment invites awareness without demanding analysis. The forest also influences how the body occupies space. Trees create vertical emphasis. Trunks draw the eye upward, then back down. Canopies frame movement without enclosing it fully. This layered structure creates a sense of containment without confinement. There is room to move, but no pressure to expand. This balance encourages softer focus. Instead of sharp attention aimed at specific targets, awareness widens gently. Peripheral vision becomes more active. The body notices patterns rather than details. Leaves move. Light shifts. Small changes register without requiring interpretation. Psychologically, this can feel like slowing down, but it is more accurately a redistribution of attention. Energy moves away from anticipation and toward presence. The environment does not reward urgency. It rewards steadiness. Forests also reduce overstimulation by limiting contrast. Colors remain within a narrow range. Greens, browns, and muted shadows dominate. This consistency reduces visual strain. The eye relaxes. Focus becomes sustainable rather than forced. Walking through a forest often leads to slower breathing patterns. This is not deliberate. The rhythm of movement, sound, and visual input supports it. The body aligns with environmental pacing. Regulation happens quietly. Importantly, none of this requires belief or expectation. The forest does not persuade. It does not instruct. It simply presents conditions that favor settling. Perception adjusts as a natural response. This shift in perception can linger after leaving the forest. Time may feel less compressed. Attention may remain wider. The body carries forward a sense of spaciousness, even when surroundings change. The forest does not need to be remembered consciously for its effects to persist briefly. Understanding this does not require analysis. It is enough to notice the pattern. Dense trees shorten distance. Curved paths soften direction. Filtered light reduces strain. Sound evens out. Together, these elements reshape experience gently and consistently. Forests do not slow time itself. They alter how time is felt. Without urgency cues, duration expands. Moments are allowed to exist without pressure. This is not escape. It is recalibration. As this section settles, there is no need to hold on to the sensation. It does not need to be recreated or pursued. The forest offers it freely when present. When absent, the memory is sufficient. Perception inside forests reminds the mind that attention does not always need to be sharp, fast, or directed. It can be wide, slow, and receptive. Time does not need to be filled. Space does not need to be crossed quickly. Here, movement becomes gentle, awareness becomes steady, and time, instead of pushing forward, rests alongside the body, unhurried and available. Forests do not rely on attention to continue. Their systems remain active whether or not anyone is present to witness them. Growth unfolds. Decay proceeds. Water moves through soil and roots. None of this requires recognition. The forest operates without pause, independent of observation. When humans enter a forest, it may feel alive in a particular way. Sounds register. Movement becomes visible. Light shifts through leaves. Yet these experiences reflect perception rather than activation. The forest was already in motion before arrival, and it will remain so after departure. Underground, networks continue their work uninterrupted. Roots expand slowly. Fungi exchange nutrients. Microorganisms break down organic matter, releasing elements back into the soil. These processes occur day and night, in light and darkness, in warmth and cold. They do not speed up when watched. They do not slow when ignored. Above ground, trees adjust quietly to changing conditions. Leaves orient toward light. Trunks respond to wind stress by strengthening over time. Branches shed or grow depending on balance rather than demand. This responsiveness is continuous, not event-based. Animals move through forests on rhythms shaped by cycles rather than schedules. Nocturnal species become active after sunset. Others move at dawn or dusk. Migration, feeding, and rest occur according to environmental cues rather than external coordination. The forest supports these patterns without supervision. When humans leave, nothing pauses. Bird calls may shift. Footpaths may grow quieter, but the underlying systems remain unchanged. Leaf litter continues to decompose. Moisture continues to cycle. Growth continues where conditions allow. This continuity can be difficult for the human mind to fully accept. Much of human life revolves around attention, monitoring, and intervention. Progress is often tied to effort and observation. Forests offer a different model. Function does not depend on awareness. This does not mean forests are static or indifferent. They are responsive, but not performative. They respond to light, water, temperature, and disturbance, not to being seen. Their changes are gradual enough that absence of observation does not interrupt them. Understanding this can soften the need to constantly engage. The forest does not require interpretation to justify its existence. It does not ask for analysis or meaning. It persists through silence. Even large-scale processes follow this pattern. Carbon is stored in wood and soil without announcement. Water filtration happens without visible mechanisms. Climate moderation occurs through countless small interactions rather than singular events. These contributions remain invisible precisely because they are stable. For the mind, there is relief in this idea. Not everything needs attention to function. Not everything depends on effort. Some systems carry on reliably, without supervision or intervention. This perspective invites a release of responsibility that is not neglect, but trust. Trust in processes that have unfolded for millions of years. Trust in systems that do not require constant correction. Forests embody this trust through their persistence. Even when disturbed, recovery begins quietly. Seedlings grow without recognition. Soil rebuilds slowly. Balance returns over time rather than immediately. This does not deny vulnerability. Forests can be harmed, but it reframes resilience. Resilience is not dramatic resistance. It is ongoing adjustment over long durations, often unnoticed. As attention rests here, there is no need to hold on to details. The idea itself can fade into background awareness. Continuity does not require memory. The forest continues when no one watches. It continues when stories end. It continues without commentary or record. Growth does not wait for validation. Decay does not ask permission. This offers a gentle model for rest. If systems can function without observation, then attention can relax without causing collapse. Stepping back does not stop continuity. As this section dissolves, the forest remains. Roots extend, leaves fall, microbes work. All of it unfolds whether named or not. Here, nothing needs to be held in the mind. The forest does not require presence to persist. It simply continues, steady and complete. Forests do not arrive at a final state. They are not finished places. What appears complete is simply a moment held within a much longer movement. Growth and decay continue together, balanced across time rather than resolved. Every forest exists in motion. Trees rise slowly, others fall. Gaps open, light shifts. New life emerges where space appears. These changes do not signal failure or success. They reflect continuity. The forest does not seek perfection. It maintains balance through ongoing adjustment. Stillness, when sensed, is often an illusion shaped by scale. Changes occur slowly enough that they feel absent, yet beneath that quiet, systems remain active. Roots extend. Soil reorganizes. Carbon moves between forms. Water cycles through leaves, air, and ground. Motion persists without urgency. Forests balance growth and decay naturally. Fallen trees become habitat. Leaf litter becomes soil. What ends feeds what follows. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. Time is allowed to do its work without interference. Even untouched forests remain dynamic. Age does not lead to stasis. It leads to complexity. Layers deepen. Structures diversify. Interactions multiply. Stability emerges not from stillness, but from flexibility, spread across long durations. This understanding dissolves the need for conclusions. There is no moment when the forest is complete. There is no final version to reach. The process itself is the state. For the mind, this offers permission to rest within incompleteness. Not everything needs resolution. Not every phase requires closure. Continuity can exist without arrival. Forests model this quietly. They exist as systems that move forward without pushing. They adapt without urgency. They respond without anxiety. Time is not something they race against. It is something they inhabit. As attention releases, there is no need to hold on to facts or sequences. The details can fade. What remains is the sense of steadiness. A system unfolding at its own pace, without demand. The forest does not ask to be understood. It does not require interpretation. Its processes continue whether noticed or not. Growth follows decay. Decay feeds growth. Balance persists through motion. Here, the topic does not end. It simply settles. Like walking out of the trees while knowing they remain behind, unchanged by departure. Nothing needs to be done. Nothing needs to be remembered. The forest continues, quietly and completely, as it always has.